Welcome, everyone. I'm a special education specialist, and honestly, I am absolutely thrilled to have you all here today. Stepping into a new classroom is such an incredible journey, and today's explainer is a really vital piece of your professional development. We are going to break down exactly what you need to know to support students with cerebral palsy, turning the latest research into practical, everyday tools you can use starting on day one. Okay, let's dive into this.
So let me ask you, does a motor disability automatically equal a cognitive disability? Too often, people subconsciously just assume the answer is yes. But as educators, we've got to completely shatter that assumption right from the start. Assuming physical limitations somehow dictate intellectual capacity, that's honestly one of the biggest disservices we can do to our kids. Today, we're going to learn exactly why.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll cover understanding cerebral palsy, early identification and types, the cognitive ability misconception, effective classroom support strategies, and finally, empowering homeschool partnerships. All right, let's jump into Section 1, Understanding Cerebral Palsy. Before we can even think about implementing strategies, we really need a solid baseline. What actually is this condition? Well, cerebral palsy is a non-progressive neurological disorder. It's caused by brain damage during early development, and it affects movement and posture. Now, the absolute key takeaway for you as a teacher is that word non-progressive. The brain injury itself, it doesn't get worse over time. But, and this is a massive however, the physical obstacles your student faces absolutely can and will change as they grow. Think about a growth spurt, for example. That can drastically shift a kid's center of gravity and balance. So your approach in the classroom has to remain incredibly dynamic and adaptable. Right off the bat, you'll likely notice some visible physical challenges. A student might really struggle with muscle control and coordination, or maybe they need help with fine and gross motor skills, things like holding a pencil or just navigating between desks. Balance, posture, and even speech and communication can be affected too. Go ahead and mentally bookmark this list of physical hurdles for a minute, all right? Because we are going to set up a really sharp contrast between these visible physical barriers and the invisible cognitive abilities a bit later on. Moving right along to Section 2. Early identification and types. Recognizing the specific variations of CP is so vital for knowing how to best support the unique child sitting right in front of you. You see, cerebral palsy is incredibly varied. You might have a student with spastic CP, which is characterized by stiff muscles and limited movement, or dyskinetic CP, which involves involuntary or uncontrolled movements. Then there's ataxic CP, which primarily affects balance and coordination, and of course, mixed CP, which is just a combination of these symptoms. And this brilliantly illustrates why individualized education plans, or IEPs, are not just some bureaucratic paperwork. No way. They are essential, completely customized roadmaps for your students' success, because every single child's experience is unique. Let's briefly look at where this all stems from. Common causes include a lack of oxygen to the brain during birth, premature birth or low birth weight, brain infections like meningitis, severe neonatal jaundice, or even early head injuries. Now, you might be wondering, why do we as teachers need to know this medical history? Well, because early identification is literally everything. The sooner these risk factors are spotted by professionals, the sooner families and educators can kick off targeted interventions and therapies. That sets the child up for a much smoother, fully supported educational journey right from day one. Okay, Section 3, the cognitive ability misconception. This is perhaps the most critical, transformative mindset shift we need to make together today. You must firmly, unequivocally separate a student's motor skills from their intellect. A student who uses a communication board because their speech muscles are affected, or a kid who uses a wheelchair to get around, they very often possess a completely normal or even way above average intellect. Never, ever assume that a physical limitation equates to an inability to excel academically. I really want this to echo in your mind every time you step into your classroom. Numerous children with cerebral palsy exhibit normal or above average intellect. Just let that sink in. Your expectations for your students with CP must remain high, appropriate, and academically rigorous. Please don't water down the curriculum. Instead, your job is to figure out how to make that high-level curriculum physically and communicatively accessible to them. Which brings us to Section 4, Effective Classroom Support Strategies. All right, let's get incredibly practical here. How do we actually support these students in our physical classroom spaces? Well, here are 4 highly actionable steps you can use right away. First, utilize adaptive learning tools and assistive technology to really level the academic playing field. Second, provide flexible seating and mobility aids to make sure navigating around the room is safe and easy. Third, modify those lesson plans for active learning. If a science experiment requires fine motor skills, adapt it so the student is still fully directing the learning and participating. And fourth, implement collaborative learning strategies. Group work builds peer inclusion so naturally. And honestly, underpinning all of these steps is the absolute need for clear communication and patience. Give your students the extra processing or physical time they need to respond and truly shine. Let's zoom out a bit and look at how this builds our broader classroom culture. Mainstream inclusion doesn't just benefit the student with cerebral palsy. When you create a space that actively normalizes accommodations and celebrates diverse abilities, inclusive classrooms teach acceptance and kindness to everyone. You are fundamentally shaping the empathy and the culture of your entire classroom. You're creating better citizens, not just better students. And our final stop, Section 5, Empowering Homeschool Partnerships. Now, your role as an educator doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? You're a vital co-partner with the student's parents. Learning and support have to extend way beyond the school bell. Parents play a massive role by encouraging consistent routines at home, supporting the specific therapy exercises recommended by physical and occupational pros, and by keeping an open, honest line of communication with you, their teacher. So the crucial point is, when you bridge the routines between home and school, you create this incredible safety net of consistency. This greatly enhances the child's confidence, giving them the secure foundation they need to build true independence. Our shared guiding philosophy really needs to be this: celebrating progress, not perfection. As educators and parents working as a united team, we have to embrace this. Look, some days will be hard, some tasks will take a lot longer than you planned. But if we consciously focus on the progress, no matter how small it might seem, we foster resilience, self-worth, and a genuine, lifelong love for learning. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final provocative reflection question. How will you build a classroom where every mind is seen, regardless of how the body moves? You now have the foundational medical knowledge, the practical strategies, and most importantly, the exact right mindset to make a massive difference. Take these inclusive strategies into your future classrooms and be the fiercely dedicated advocate your students absolutely deserve. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this vital topic today, and happy teaching.